Bullets fired, rocks thrown, blood spilled, and lifetimes of regret. It's May 4th, 1970, a day that will forever live in infamy, especially for the alumni and staff of Kent State University.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Tonight I want to talk to you on a subject of deep concern to all Americans and to many people in all parts of the world, the war in Vietnam.
A group of concerned protesters have been growing all morning and culminated to a sum of over 2,000 protesters. After multiple attempts to disperse the crowd in a peaceful manner, the Ohio State National Guard eventually used tear gas to thin the herd of students. The gas proved fruitless, leading the guards to turn to advance with bayonets and a few but deadly shots. Suddenly they turned around, got on their knees, as if they were ordered to. They did it all together, aimed. And personally, I was standing there saying, they're not going to shoot. They can't do that. If they're going to shoot, it's going to be blanks. This was the shock of a single student, but it also symbolizes the horror of all 2,000 in protest at midday at Kent State University. In response to President Nixon's decision and the violence at Kent State, universities from around the country protested and together formed the largest student strike in U.S. national history. One of the most vocal and provocative of the protesting universities was the University of Washington, whose numbers grew to nearly 8,000 concerned students who demanded for the then president to promise to never call the National Guard and to suspend further ROTC support in order to prevent another massacre like at Kent. May of 1970, the National Week of Student Strikes was one of the largest protest movements and acts of solidarity throughout the country, especially symbolized at the University of Washington. The national support and size of the strikes forced the president to acknowledge the student protesters with legitimate concerns, not ignored and titled as bums. In the following weeks, President Nixon spoke with various student organizations from colleges and told them, I know, you think we are a bunch of so-and-sos. I know how you feel. You want the war to be over. Try to understand what we were doing. Sure, you came here to demonstrate. Go shout your slogans on the ellipse. That is all right. Just, please, keep it peaceful. Almost immediately after the deaths at Kent, change was made, and voices were suddenly heard. Both sides, the students and the National Guard, were forced by expectations and directives to commit regrettable actions. Students simply followed their morals and placed themselves in their peers' shoes who were at that moment fighting in a war seen as unneeded and terribly mismanaged. And the Ohio National Guard followed commands from the highest authority to disperse the ongoing rally. Understanding different perspectives is the only method to prevent these violent clashes where there are only losers. Nearly 22 years after this campus conflict, the 4 slain students' words were finally heard when the voting age was lowered 3 years to 18, thus allowing their views to be heard on a national stage. Prior, young men this age could be randomly selected to be sent to serve in an international conflict, but have zero opinion about the men who designated when it was needed to enact a draft. Unknowingly, the 4 lives lost at Kent spurred action that led to a greater conversation. Many say that we undergo 2 deaths, whenever our heart releases its final flex, and when our memory is forgotten by those still living. Alison Krauss, Jeffrey Miller, William Knox Schroeder, and Sandra Schuler. Do not forget these names and their significant impact to our modern-day political scene. One death is enough for these four scholars taken prematurely.